Thanks everybody for coming out today to hear a little bit about myself, a little bit more about Knock Knock, and kind of, a little bit of what's going on. Kind of like y'all heard in my introduction, I've had the great pleasure of being in the museum business, really for the better part of about 22 years. I was fortunate enough to be able to start out in a museum as kind of a helper guy, an odd projects kind of guy, and quickly kind of made my way through the ranks at the museum and had the great opportunity to run several different departments inside a museum. I was a guest services director, a facilities director, and exhibits director. I've worked on educational programming and everything almost in between from there. So it's been a really great experience so far, and just really have had a great opportunity to learn a lot in this industry and really develop some amazing things, and really with the end goal, hopefully, of transforming the lives of lots of kids to help them learn about STEM and what STEM careers can mean, and sort of keep them on that trajectory, let's say. It was really an honor when I went through the interview process to come here to Knock Knock Children's Museum. I've followed lots of museums nationally, and I had sort of seen a lot of the early press that had come out about Knock Knock in the beginning, and it was really quite fascinating to see how a museum that was sort of started by people that had really a commitment to the community, were able to kind of birth an institution, and then the amazing building that it turned into. One of the things that I think is pretty interesting is early on, I remember I was chatting with some of the founding ladies in the museum, and I know one of them had mentioned to me, at one point somebody had said to them, well, you all have to pick a date. Pick a date that you're either going to, have this thing going, or you're going to say, we're not going to make it happen. And they said no, they weren't going to pick a date. They had enough, of a vision to go, we know this is needed for the community. We're going to make sure it happens, and we're going to see that it goes forward. And, when I think about that statement a lot, I kind of think about myself having been somebody, again, that kind of came up through the museum and sort of always had that drive, right? I kind of knew early on in this that I wanted to be an executive director, and I was fortunate to make that happen. These ladies sort of knew that this was something that was really needed for this community, and they were really focused on sort of making this happen. And I really think when you look at Knock Knock as a facility, it certainly really is, I think, everything that they maybe have envisioned that it could have been, if not more. And I think, also now having just about 90 days at the museum and having had the opportunity to work with the staff there, they really did a great job recruiting a fantastic staff. I don't know how many people in the audience have had a chance to work with them, but, they really are exemplary and really do a great job. When you think about that, they opened that museum, and pretty much I think maybe almost everybody came out to see it. We had over 200,000 people come in the first year to visit the museum, and really a whole new museum with a whole new team and new exhibits. They really did an amazing job, getting that on and up and running and going. So really just a great group of folks, and I'm really honored to be their leader there at the museum. So one quick story that I'll tell here, because sometimes people say to me, why children's museums? Why would you do children's museum? Where does that passion, that excitement sort of come from? And I feel like the story for me that most represents that is I remember when I was a little kid, and I'd go to visit my grandparents, and I probably was getting under everybody's skin, driving them nuts. My grandfather would tell me to go downstairs, and he'd give me a hammer, and he'd say, you can have this hammer and these nails and this old wood, and you can sort of make anything you want or do what you want down there. And I really wasn't all that well supervised, which maybe in today's world you probably wouldn't give a kid saws and a hammer and say, yeah, go crazy. But for me, it was a fascinating time, right? It was interesting. I took things apart. I put them together. I did a lot of learning, and I was able to sort of do it on my own. I was able to do it at my own pace. And I often feel like when people ask me, they say, what do you think has made you successful? I think, well, it was that experience as a kid, right? I took things apart, I put them back together, I learned, I tried different things. I learned that, if you hit your thumb with the hammer, that wasn't a good plan, and to not do that again. And, I just was always evolving and always learning, and I wanted to sort of show people what I had done and explain to them what I was thinking about it. And I always felt like that was sort of such a transformative experience for me that I sort of brought forward as I developed sort of a problem-solving skill set in my own life. I didn't know as a young kid what job I was going to have, but I always feel like the skills that I learned from those early activities really influenced sort of the person that I became. And even as an adult, I mean, I'm a tinkerer and a builder. I like to, I built museum exhibits and things like that. And I really, maintain that passion for that really throughout my entire life. So, I mean, to that end, when you think about something on the scale of what Knock Knock is, where we are about a 3,600 square foot facility, we've got 18 learning zones, and, really with purpose, they have crafted these experiences for kids to come into that space and learn and play and interact. And the amazing thing, kind of like my own experience, the kids really are almost unaware that they're learning, right? There's lots of education happening in the museum space, lots of exciting things, lots of social experiences, emotional experiences. They're doing things that are physical. They're having tactile experiences. But they don't feel like they're at school, even though they're probably learning just as much at the museum as they might learn at school. And I think that's really a fantastic element. I think one of the other things that Knock Knock does, which is so great, is that we kind of bring people together from all different backgrounds, different cultures, different experiences, and all the kids sort of play collaboratively together. And I think when you look at the founders of the museum and what their vision was for it, that was a big part of their vision. They wanted to have a place that was barrier-free, that people from all across the community could come and play and interact. And really, I think at the end of the day, that's really what we have as a museum. Which, again, if that was your plan and that's what you came up with, I think you've done better probably than most. I think at this time, one of the things that's really important as we look at the role that children's museums play, going forward, we all know that kids live in an increasingly digital world, right? I mean, we've got a device, we're connected all the time, whereas when you think about the museum to some extent, we're almost the opposite of that. We're hands-on, we're in the moment, we're not so focused on, here's something you can watch, here's, you just swipe and you interact. We create that sort of real, earnest interaction that the kids can do, whether they play with other kids or they play independently. It's a physical activity. And I think what we find is the more times we tie different activities in, different senses in, different types of learning, and that's really where the kids start to have that really unique experience. And I think when we can sort of show them that they can learn almost that problem-solving ideology that I learned as a kid at Knock Knock, I think that's really, again, where the museum has done a great job is creating that. There's a really interesting part of the museum that I think some visitors miss when they just go through, where there's actually career readiness and exposure baked into the entire museum as you go through the museum. So each one of our 18 learning zones has a career readiness and exposure component to it, where kids can actually get in, and if they're having a great time in the Go-Go Garage, it might list like 6 careers that you could do that could relate to that. The same thing for our makerspace and all the other galleries that are there. And I think, that's really important for the kids that come to not only understand that they can play and that they can learn and that they can do things, but that if this strikes something inside that kid, that they can, look at it and see that could be a career for them in the future. I think that's very, very important for the kids to sort of see that, because I think all too often, kids will only see the careers that are in their everyday life, right? They're the folks that they interact with and the careers that they have. And I think if we can help expand that through Knock Knock, I think that's really a great piece. Just some, very, very exciting kind of facts and data that it's coming out about the museum and how we did for 2018. We're just working on our impact report for 2018. We're almost done, but I'm going to share with you all some of the sort of early highlights from that report. So for 2018, we had 188,000 and some change visitors come to the museum. So for pretty much this August will be our second year. So pretty much right off the bat, we're at 188. That's a really strong attendance number, and I think that actually exceeded our early estimations of what the museum was going to do. Out of that attendance number, about 40% of the people that attended in that number were just general admission. So those were families, grandparents, anybody just come and see the museum, have spend a day, play, and all of that. It was about 40% of our total folks that came out. We had about 34% of the people that came to the museum were members. So those are mostly families that purchase memberships that come, and a lot of them come over and over and over again. It's kind of one of the cool things for Knock Knock, even though it's a very large museum, I think it still has a very personable feel to it. So there are members that almost come every day, and our front desk staff knows them and they know their staff. And it's really sort of a unique thing when you can have a museum as big as Knock Knock yet still have that personal touch. So we really are excited about that too. We had about 17% of our visitors were field trips, and then another great number, which is really exciting, and I'll talk about just for a little bit, is that we had about 9% of the people that came to the museum either came for free or with a reduced admission. As I've said a couple times, one of the visions for Knock Knock when it was put together was that there would not be a fiscal barrier for people to come to the museums. So we really broke that barrier down over the last year. We had 5 different free days during the year, and we actually brought in about 8,300 people just through that free day. And we got, those were funded days by a host of great companies in the area and individuals that supported that so that we could provide people with that access. And that's really a great number. And I think if you look at the numbers, so since Knock Knock opened, we've done 17,453 discounted or free admissions to the museum. Again, I think that really speaks to the testament that we want to make sure that everybody that wants to come to the museum can come to the museum. For us, kind of another interesting one is we've got about 2,100 members for the museum. So those are people that live in this community, support it enough to purchase a membership and come. And then over the course of that last year, we had about 582 new donors. Those are individuals that came to pledge their financial support to help the museum, to help us carry our mission forward. And certainly, we can't do all the things we do without our great donors and community supporters. One of the things that's interesting from a attendance by parish perspective is about 75% of the people that come to the museum come from East Baton Rouge. So that's our primary market audience. Our sort of secondary audience is Ascension and Livingston Parish. And then kind of our lower parishes that come out are West Baton Rouge, Iberville, Point Capee, West and East Feliciana. A little bit smaller numbers on there. So, really what we've done in the first 2 years has been very strong in Baton Rouge, and we're really, this year, during 2019, we're really trying to get out and expand to try to make sure that those surrounding parishes that maybe aren't as well represented right now have people that are coming to the museum and really starting to learn and kind of enjoy what we have at Knock Knock, and I think we're gaining some traction on that front. One of the other things that's really great when you think about a museum that was sort of built by this community for this community, not only is it financially supported by the community and also supported by people that come and pay at the front desk, but it's also supported by volunteers. So we had about 2,300 volunteers last year that came out to the museum, and those are people that donated their own time to come and work in the museum or play with visitors. And some of them, they come every week. You think about the commitment and the excitement that someone has to come and do like an 8-hour day one day a week, every week, just because they enjoy playing with the kids and being out on the floor and helping. It really is, it's impactful. And, I get that privilege of walking the floor and getting to talk to the volunteers. And when they start telling you the stories of the kids they've met and the stories the kids have told them and the impact that that's had on them and what coming to Knock Knock and being a volunteer has meant to them, it really does resonate. And it really reminds you, I think, too, that this is a museum that's for the community and really well supported by it. So out of those 2,300 volunteers that we had, that turned into about 11,000, I'm rounding up a little bit, 11,000 hours of volunteer time. And, that really comes with a value of about $240,000. So, that volunteer labor is significant for us as a business. So we really, again, are very appreciative of all our volunteers. And I think we're also fortunate, at the caliber of volunteers that we've had at the museum over time. So I think that's been a great one. Some of the other fun and exciting stuff, I know the numbers aren't always the most exciting part of it, but, this summer we've had a couple new initiatives going on. We did a summer membership campaign where we sold a 3-month membership, which was a new idea for this summer, which went very successfully. I don't know those exact numbers, but we've had some good number of people take advantage of that programming. And then also coming up just around the corner, if y'all are looking for something fun to do, on August 17th and 18th, we will have Knock Stock. So if you don't know what Knockstock is, you're going to find out real fast. So Knockstock is a children's music festival, so it's 2 nights. It's from 4 to 8 o'clock at night. It's our fun play on Woodstock. So we'll have different bands out there playing. We will have fun kids' activities for them to do in the evening. And I think it's really going to be a great event. We're going to have like a craft style, like maker vendor fair going on at the same time. Should be a great time for the whole family. People can actually get an individual ticket, or you can get a 2-day pass, again, kind of like Music Festival, and you come both nights and see it, and then the museum will be open during the day both of those days. So that's a pretty exciting event. Our team has done a great job, I think, planning that event all summer long, and even right when I first got to the museum, which was pretty interesting. One of the other things that's exciting about that event is that event we will have our pie challenge. Will come to its conclusion that night. Now, really quickly, when I started, somebody shortly after I began came down and squeamishly said, "Would you be willing to be part of the pie challenge?" I naturally thought that might be eating pies, and I could eat a pie. I thought that would be okay. Subsequently, I found out it is to have someone throw a pie in your face, but I did still commit to doing it. So if you'd like to come see me get pied in the face at Knockstock for some additional fun, you can come out one of those 2 nights. We also, which was great, we got about 8 other members of the community to sign up to help raise money for Knock Knock. So we've got a great group. You can go to our website or check us out on Facebook for that and see all the people helping us raise money for SciTech through the Pie Challenge at Knockstock. One of the other events that we have coming up that's pretty interesting is we're going to actually have have an educator night at the museum. So that's a time where educators can come without their kids right before school starts. That'll be August 2nd in the evening at 6:30. And they'll have the opportunity to actually tour the museum and kind of get a preview of the programming that we're going to have this coming school year at the museum for them to book when they come out with their field trips. And really, we're doing that as a great sort of community education piece to let people know what programs you can come to the museum and get, maybe what programs we can bring out to y'all and do, or if you want to do a little bit of a duet of those two things. Our education department has been working really hard these last couple of, well, probably 2 months actually at this point, to kind of put that together. They've got door prizes, they've got fun stuff for teachers, we've got some, actually, we have some material that had gotten donated to Knock Knock that we may not use, so we're going to open that up to the teachers that come that night, just to kind of give them a little enhancement onto that visit that they come to the museum to help out with that. So, you know, we're just about here closing out the last end of July, heading into early August will be sort of the end of our summer season at Knock Knock, and then we are eagerly heading into the fall. We'll have a couple of public events in the fall. We will have booze there for Halloween. Again, we love to play on names. We'll have booze there for Halloween, which will be another great event for the kids. And we will also have, in early October, ahead of that, we will have our Storybook Soiree. And this year's theme is the Wizard of Oz. That is our big gala for the museum. They have lots and lots of very creative and very exciting things planned for that event. We are still looking for people who are looking to get tickets or be sponsors. It will be a great, great time. I think for me, that's kind of a bit of a snapshot of what's going on at the museum, what's been going on, a little bit of what I've done in the first 90 days. And certainly I'd be happy to, you know, open up the floor and take questions from y'all if you have questions.
Tell us about the money. How much does it cost to get in?
So the question was admissions, pricing, things like that. So admissions to the museum, it's $14 per person for general admission to the museum. We have family memberships and a lot of different membership options, so you can kind of pick and choose if you like for a membership. Once you pay that admission to come into the museum, you can stay at the museum all day. This summer we expanded our services to include our Knock Knock food truck that's outside, so you have a little food trailer there, so you can come and you can get a bite to eat and you can stay and play at the museum all day. I think our average visitor time for the museum is about 2.5 to maybe 3 hours, if not a little more, depending on how often your family comes. So it's certainly well worth the admission, and certainly everybody in the family will have a great, great time. And then we also have our art garden and our maker space will have activities that will change monthly. So maybe if you came, you know, back in the winter, you certainly could come again this season. You'll see different activities in those two spaces. Those two galleries change every month, and actually every week they usually swap out a different activity in both the art garden and the make shop.
Of your 188,000 visitors you've had so far this year, how many, and you may have said it, and you talked about it earlier, how many of those children were allowed to come in admission-free because of donations made to the museum? Because I know that's always been something people have been concerned about, is touching all the children in the city, and the number that probably can't afford 2 or 3 children going at $14 a head. So how many children have you touched through donations, and how is all that handled?
So the question was, how many children have we seen through discounted or reduced admission? So the total number since we opened is 17,453 total attendance. I don't have the breakdown of kids and adults, but that's the total number since we opened of people that have been able to come to the museum under free or reduced admission. So you can get free or reduced. You can get the reduced admission if you have WIC or you have an EBT card. You can pay $3 per person to come in with that, or you can come on any one of our free days. And out of that, we had about 8,300 people of that number came on free days. So you don't have to bring any ID on a free day, you don't have to show anything, but you can come in. The numbers on free day, which is pretty amazing when you think about it, it's a Sunday typically. We're only open from about 11 to 5, and on average, I think we're doing between 2,000 and 3,500 people in that one day. So usually we're just turning them over all day long, all day that day. And we have one coming up in August that is sponsored by Aetna, and then we have one that's Connecticut Home Builder, or Connecticut, sorry, that's the Baton Rouge Home Builders Association coming up in September. So we usually fundraise for those as individual days. So we'll go out and get an individual sponsor that can support, a one-day event, and then we have a fund that we call our Access for All Fund, which is where the remainder of the funding for the EBT and WIC comes from. And then we're always out again raising money to keep those funds inflated. Our goal is to never have to turn anybody away due to a fiscal limitation. So that's why we're always out sort of raising money to keep those funds available for the folks that need to take advantage of that.
The numbers are astounding for your first year, 2,000. How does that compare to other museums or other museum openings around?
So the question was, how does the attendance numbers that we're seeing compare to other museums around the country? That's kind of a hard question to answer to some extent because every market obviously varies bit to bit. I know there's a couple other museums that people sort of model after and think, well, these are some of the better ones. Wow, Children's Museum is one that comes to mind. And I want to say they're about rolling on to 5 years, and they're almost at about 1 million visitors. So I mean, we're on that pace right now. So I mean, in my head, I think about that. Could we do 1 million visitors in 5 years? That probably would be really ambitious in our market here. But so I mean, I think we're probably better than most markets that are our size on a national scale. We have a handful of museums that we use that we do some modeling after. So when we kind of want to see how we're doing, we look at what they did and what they did in their life cycle and how we bring that into what we're doing at Knock Knock in our sort of business cycle. So I mean, I think we sort of embody that continuous innovation approach. So we're always sort of looking out into the industry, looking at what people are doing, and then how do we do best practices sort of from that, and then how do we use that to do informed decision making so we can kind of go down the line. But I mean, I think, again, by all intents and purposes, the results we've seen out of Knock Knock surpassed, I think, even what the initial consultants that did some of the feasibility were thinking. So I mean, I think it really is a testament to what the need was in the community when they built the building.
And who are those model museums?
Betty Bryn Children's Museum is one of the ones that we look at. There's 2 or 3 others, and then we certainly look at like Indianapolis Children's Museum, which is a very large museum, but we'll look at like what they're doing, how they're doing the events. Children's Museum of Houston's another one, even though they're much bigger than us. We kind of look at, what are they doing and how are they doing it. So I mean, I think, children's museums, 20 years ago, there were very few of them, and now they really has sprung up as an entire sort of industry across the country. So I mean, I think it's still very new. You have some science centers out there that have been around for over 100 years, and most children's museums are, in the last 30 years, and I mean, Boston Children's Museum has been around a little bit longer than that, but most of them are pretty young institutions too. So it's really a whole, phenomena that's really gone across the country. And certainly I think as we've learned about kids and how kids learn and early brain development and what the importance is of that early brain development, I think the case statement for children's museums like built itself, right? I mean, you could see that this can be transformative for the kids because we know all the data that supports why this is a great thing to do. So I think we look at all that and put it all together.
In the first year of operation of the museum, I know the museum raised $1.1 million in philanthropy dollars. I know this August starts on Thursday, but I was wondering if you had any preliminary estimates on how much y'all raised in the past year.
So the question was, how much money have we raised, I guess, in the current fiscal year? Most of our fundraisers take place in the fall. So we're just sort of heading into our big season, so we're just launching our annual fund campaign. I think we're probably 50% to our goal for the year, which is where we would expect to be year to date.
Okay, so, well, how about from August 2018 to August 2019?
I don't know that I know that one off the top. The question was, from a fundraising standpoint, we raised $1.1 million the first year. Sort of where do we stand in that range right now, if I understand your question?
Yeah, because I know the business report reported, I believe in September, that from August 2017 to August 2018, they raised the 1.1. So I was wondering from 2018 to 2019.
Yeah, and they must have pulled that number just for that because our fiscal is calendar year. So I didn't really grab any numbers that sort of relate to that one. But I know year to date, I think we're 50% to our goal, which would close out, December 31st would be year end. So we're tracking where we like to be. But with our annual fund, is just ramping up right now. Our soiree event is going on, and we're out, starting to solicit funds for next year's free days.
You mentioned STEM.
Yep.
How is STEM integrated into the museum? And is there some kind of creative component to it?
Sure. So the question was, how is STEM mixed into the museum, and is there a creative component to it? The museum has lots of STEM components sort of inherently, I would say, baked into it. A couple of examples that stand out really strong are we have a make shop on the first floor of the museum, and typically they're doing activities in there which revolve around taking things apart, putting things back together, building robots in there, doing adaptive design. A lot of times they're doing simple circuit construction and whatever. And in that space, there really is if you want to see the STEM just right up in the front. That's kind of your space where that takes place. I certainly think, from my standpoint, when you go through the museum, there is that STEM built into all of it. I mean, in the go-go garage, the kids are working with real nuts and real bolts, and they put tires on. They can test the voltage in the car battery. They can do a lot of those things, right? So, I mean, those are all sort of STEM learning skills. We've got downstairs in the Bayou building area, we've got a crane. The kids can actually ride the crane, and they can move it left and right and use the claw and pick it up. And they're learning, about all the different mechanics that it takes to do that. We also, in that same gallery, have an exhibit where the kids can pull down or pull themselves up using compound pulleys. So I mean, there is a ton of STEM baked into everything that takes place really at Knock Knock. We have the replica of the Mississippi River Bridge that's in there as well. And the kids can actually add on different truss sections to the bridge to kind of see how that goes. So there's just a lot of it. It's really apparent, I think, in all the gallery space that we have in the museum. But I think that make shop is really the one that kind of shines the brightest light on it all the time. And it's because those activities are always changing. Again, a visitor could come, 4 times in a month and maybe see a different activity in that space every time they come, which is really pretty dynamic for such a big museum. Yeah, very creative. Yeah, we've got an amazingly creative education department or learning innovations for the museum, and really they get in and work with the kids and come up with programming that really fits the kids at their educational level and helps sort of expand out the knowledge base that those kids already have. I think we've put together some really great curriculum pieces that we use with the kids, and it's always evident when you see the kids just smiling when they're in the museum and they're having a great time, and then certainly bringing home their art projects or their little make shop creations that they made. And they're always proud to tell their parents a little story about what they did. An interesting thing about that, even that little bit of storytelling, really that's a 21st century skill that we try to teach kids, right? Is that they can have an idea and articulate what they made and tell somebody why they did it and how they did it. And the fact that they're just doing it as a, hey, mom, look what I made, later on in life, that's going to come back to them maybe, depending on what career they choose, to be able to get up and really talk about that and what that all means. Oh.
You probably said this a while ago. I apologize. I had to take care of some business back in the back. How many other cities in Louisiana have a similar museum?
I think, children's museums, there's obviously, there's one down in New Orleans, and I think there's one other smaller one in Lafayette, if my mind is correct. And then there's Cyport in Shreveport, which is for a little bit older of an audience. So, obviously we're the only attraction in the capital city, and none of those places are really right around the corner. So in a pretty wide radius, Knock Knock is the provider, let's say. Yes.
Whenever the museum was constructed, I knew there were some spaces left unfinished,
Mm-hmm.
maybe upper floors for future expansions. Has there been any movement on building those out or anything like that?
Yeah, we do have some space we didn't finish out in the museum in the initial sort of go around when we built the building. I think what we're doing is we're just about at a point, I'm just about at 90 days in where we're starting to do that sort of strategic planning, right, which would include building out those spaces, and then how do we sort of upfit the rest of that. There was so I think we're just now kind of starting to have that dynamic conversation. I think initially, the excitement and the energy about coming to Knock Knock when it first opened was sort of, the driver for everything, right? And I think now, we're kind of looking at how do we go from sort of an opening business model to a sustaining business model, and maintain that growth and that trajectory. And I think that's where those other areas kind of come into play, right? Is as we try to grow our program offerings, we develop the case statement for the needs for those spaces. I think, right, initially it was admissions, right? And now as we begin that sort of diversification, that's where those needs come in. I think this year we're kind of focusing on going out on the road and doing some programming, which we hadn't historically done, which I think is like an interim step to then, working on some of those other areas of the building that we didn't build out and getting that part completed. But we've really done a good job of, I would say from an occupancy use standpoint, we really utilize pretty much every square foot of that entire facility that we have right now. There is no space that is not, used for some, purpose that we needed it. So, I think a good vision for what that was going to be. And then even in the interim, before some of those spaces get built out, we're using some of that as office space for right now and different purposes. So, we're really putting every square foot to good use. Oh, go ahead.
Just a suggestion with a question. Okay, so the question is coming, but I just remember a few months ago when they were building the Top Golf. They opened up in the city of Wayne. And I can tell you, everybody that I talked to was wondering what in the world that was. It's all a tall pole, it's all good. And then all of a sudden, there it is. Now everybody knows where it is. With the Knock Knock Children's Museum, to be honest with you, folks just don't know where it is. So, with regard to out-of-town visitors or even local visitors, do you think if you had something that would be more visible, that people could see something like that you'd actually have more visitors?
Where we're located, if you're coming, I think it's east, you have a great view of the front side of the museum. So, you get one side, we get a great view. The other side is not quite as much. I think, the iconic front entrance on the museum, for anybody that's going down Dalrymple, they can sort of see that and kind of gather that we're there. I think, again, to your point about people from out of town and surrounding places, I think that's really what we're focusing on right now is how do we expand that reach. Right, I think we've got some really great saturation in the area. People that know we're here, they were, part of that group that helped make the case statement for us being here. I think now we're trying to reach out wider and, market out to a further radius to try to bring those people in, bring some tourism dollars back into the city. And I think that's kind of the campaign that we've been on just in the last little bit of time is how do we grow and expand that area.
Well, it's just not only that, really a lot of people that might not live in that area, but still in Louisiana, still don't know that that's what that is.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're aware of it, and we're really working on the plan to kind of get that over the hump, so that way everybody in this region sort of knows that we're here and is really coming to see the museum, because I think so many things have been done in such a great way at that museum that I would say are probably some best practices on a national level. Really, we want people to know it. We don't want to be the best kept secret in Baton Rouge, right? We want to be the best thing that everybody talks about and people are coming from out of state to see. So we're really working on how do we grow and diversify that sort of marketing mix so that we're drawing people in from a wider radius, for sure.